Vin Diesel sat in a plush chair inside his luxurious trailer on the set of yet another blockbuster movie. The hum of fans and crew members moving around faded into the background as he leaned back, letting his mind drift away from scripts, cameras, and action sequences. Fame had come to him like a storm, sudden, powerful, and unrelenting, but there were moments when he longed for the simplicity of his past. As he stared at the ceiling, something tugged at his memory. A face, warm and kind, floated into his thoughts. It was Mrs. Evelyn Carter, his fifth-grade teacher. She wasn't just any teacher, she was the one who saw potential in him when he doubted himself. Back then, young Vin, known to his classmates as Mark Sinclair, wasn't exactly the star student. He struggled with reading comprehension and often felt lost in class. But Mrs. Carter never gave up on him. He remembered staying after school almost every day during that year. While other kids rushed home to play or watch TV, Vin stayed behind in Mrs. Carter's classroom. She would sit patiently beside him, pointing at words on the page and helping him sound them out. Her voice was calm, encouraging, never impatient. "You can do this," she'd say, her eyes lighting up with belief. And somehow, because she believed in him, he started believing in himself too. But it wasn't just academics where Mrs. Carter made an impact. One day, during a school talent show, Vin hesitantly signed up to perform a short skit. Most of the kids laughed at his choice, teasing him for being awkward. But Mrs. Carter pulled him aside before the performance. "Mark," she said firmly, but gently, "don't let anyone tell you what you're capable of. You have a gift for storytelling. Trust yourself." Those words stuck with him like glue. That night, standing on stage under flickering fluorescent lights, Vin delivered his lines with confidence. The applause afterward wasn't thunderous, but it didn't need to be. For the first time, he realized he could connect with people through stories. Years passed, and life carried him far from those humble beginnings. From struggling actor to global icon, Vin built an empire rooted in action-packed films and larger-than-life characters. Yet no matter how many red carpets he walked or interviews he gave, Mrs. Carter's influence lingered. He often wondered what had become of her. Had she retired happily? Was she still inspiring young minds somewhere? One evening, while scrolling through social media, Vin stumbled upon a local news article about budget cuts affecting public schools. It mentioned veteran teachers forced to retire early due to financial strain. His heart sank. Could Mrs. Carter be one of them? He tried searching online for updates about her but found nothing concrete. A wave of guilt washed over him. Here, he was, living a life filled with success, while the woman who helped lay its foundation might be struggling silently. That night, sleep eluded him. Memories of Mrs. Carter's patient smile and reassuring words played over and over in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that he owed her more than just gratitude. She had planted seeds of hope in him, and now, decades later, he wanted to ensure her own life reflected the love and dedication she poured into others. Little did he know fate was about to step in and bring him face to face with the very person haunting his thoughts. The next morning, Vin decided to take a break from the chaos of his Hollywood life. He was in New York City for the premiere of one of his latest films, but instead of spending the day surrounded by handlers and flashing cameras, he craved a taste of normalcy. Dressed in a simple hoodie and jeans with sunglasses shielding his famous face, he wandered through the streets of his old neighborhood. The familiar sights, the corner store where he used to buy candy, the park where he played stickball as a kid, brought back a flood of memories. Feeling nostalgic, Vin stopped at a small cafe on the edge of the block. As he sipped his coffee, he glanced out the window, watching people go about their day. A woman across the street caught his attention. She was standing outside a grocery store, carefully examining items on a shelf near the entrance. Her movements were slow and deliberate, her hands trembling slightly as she picked up a can of soup and turned it over to check the price. There was something achingly familiar about her posture, the way she carried herself with quiet dignity, despite the weight of whatever burden she bore. Vin squinted, trying to get a better look. Something about her felt like a ghost from his past, lingering just out of reach. Then it hit him, a wave of recognition so strong it made his chest tighten. It was Mrs. Carter, his fifth-grade teacher, the woman who had once spent countless afternoons helping him sound out words and believe in himself. He blinked, unsure if his eyes were playing tricks on him, but there was no mistaking that gentle presence. For a moment, Vin hesitated. What if he was wrong? What if he embarrassed her, or worse, intruded on a private moment? But curiosity and emotion got the better of him. Leaving his coffee cup on the table, he stepped outside and crossed the street. Up close, he could see the years etched into her face. Her hair was streaked with silver now, and her once vibrant energy seemed tempered by fatigue. Still, her eyes held the same kindness he remembered. "Mrs. Carter?" he said softly, his voice tinged with disbelief. She looked up, startled, then squinted at him. For a second, confusion clouded her expression. Then slowly, realization dawned. "Mark?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Is that really you?" Vin nodded, a lump rising in his throat. "Yes, ma'am, it's me." Her face lit up with surprise and joy. "Oh my goodness," she exclaimed, placing a hand over her heart. "Look, at you, you're all grown up." She laughed softly, shaking her head as if she couldn't quite believe it. "I always knew you'd do great things." Hearing those words again, even after all these years, sent a jolt of warmth through Vin. But as he studied her more closely, his happiness was tinged with concern. The vibrant teacher he remembered seemed diminished somehow. Her clothes were worn, her shoes scuffed, and the shopping basket in her hand contained only a few basic items: bread, canned goods, and a box of generic cereal. "How have you been?" Vin asked, forcing a smile. "It's been such a long time." Mrs. Carter sighed, glancing down at her basket. "Well, I've seen better days, I suppose. Retirement isn't as golden as they say it is." She chuckled lightly, though there was a hint of sadness in her tone. "But I'm getting by. That's all any of us can do, right?" Vin nodded, though his stomach churned with unease. He wanted to ask more, to dig deeper into how she ended up here, but he didn't want to pry or make her uncomfortable. Instead, he offered to help carry her groceries to her car. She politely declined, explaining that she lived just a few blocks away and preferred to walk. As they parted ways, Vin watched her shuffle down the sidewalk, each step heavy with effort. He stood there for a long time, rooted to the spot, his mind racing. Memories of her classroom flooded back. The rows of desks, the colorful posters on the walls, the way she always greeted her students with a bright smile. This woman, who had given so much of herself to shape young lives, deserved so much more than this. And as Vin walked back to his hotel, his heart ached with a mix of gratitude and guilt. He knew he couldn't just walk away, not this time. Back at his hotel, Vin couldn't shake the image of Mrs. Carter from his mind. Her tired eyes and worn-out shoes lingered in his thoughts like a haunting melody he couldn't silence. He replayed their brief encounter over and over, dissecting every word she had said and hadn't said. There was something unspoken in her tone, a quiet resignation that broke his heart. She had always been the strong one, the steady presence who lifted others up. Seeing her now struggling just to make ends meet felt wrong on so many levels. Determined to understand more about her situation, Vin reached out to a private investigator he trusted, a discreet professional who often helped him with personal matters. Within hours, the investigator sent back a detailed report. What Vin read left him stunned. Mrs. Carter's husband, whom she had cared for until his passing 5 years earlier, had suffered from a long illness that drained their savings. Medical bills piled up faster than they could pay them off, leaving her with little financial cushion once he passed away. Without family nearby to support her, she relied solely on a modest pension that barely covered rent and basic necessities. The report also revealed that Mrs. Carter occasionally volunteered at a local community center, teaching reading skills to children whose parents couldn't afford tutoring. Even in her struggles, she continued to give back, pouring what little energy she had into helping others. Reading this, Vin felt a surge of admiration mixed with guilt. Here was a woman who had dedicated her entire life to nurturing young minds, yet society seemed to have forgotten her when she needed help the most. That evening, Vin sat alone in his hotel room, staring out the window at the glittering New York skyline. The irony wasn't lost on him. Just blocks away from where he stood, multi-million-dollar deals were being made in high-rise offices, while someone as vital as Mrs. Carter struggled to put food on her table. How could this happen? Teachers like her were the backbone of communities, shaping future leaders and planting seeds of hope in countless lives. Yet, when it came time for them to retire, they were left to fend for themselves. Unable to sit still, Vin grabbed his phone and scrolled through old photos from his childhood. One picture stood out, a class photo from 5th grade. In it, Mrs. Carter stood proudly behind her students, her arms folded across her chest, a warm smile lighting up. Her face. Vin remembered how she used to tell the class, "You're all capable of greatness, never let anyone tell you otherwise." Those words had stuck with him throughout his life, fueling his determination to succeed against all odds. Now looking at her weathered face in his memory, he wondered if she ever doubted her own worth. Feeling restless, Vin decided to act immediately. He called his assistant and instructed her to send an anonymous donation to cover Mrs. Carter's outstanding bills and provide her with a small monthly stipend moving forward. It wasn't much compared to what she truly deserved, but it was a start. As he hung up the phone, however, he realized this wasn't enough. Sending money would alleviate some of her immediate burdens, but it wouldn't address the larger issue, the systemic neglect of retired educators living in poverty. Brent Wyam leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. He knew he had the power to do more, not just for Mrs. Carter, but for teachers everywhere facing similar hardships. For years, he had used his fame to spotlight important causes, from environmental conservation to supporting underprivileged youth. Why not use his platform to shine a light on this overlooked crisis? The idea began to take shape in his mind, growing bigger and bolder with each passing second. He picked up a notebook and started jotting down ideas. A campaign? A documentary? Something even larger? Whatever it was, it needed to honor Mrs. Carter's legacy while addressing the root causes of the problem. By the time dawn broke outside his window, Vin had sketched out the beginnings of a plan. His heart raced with anticipation, knowing that this could be one of the most meaningful things he'd ever done. As he closed the notebook and set it aside, Vin allowed himself a moment of reflection. This wasn't just about repaying a debt to Mrs. Carter. It was about recognizing the value of teachers everywhere. They shaped futures, inspired dreams, and built bridges to better tomorrows. And if anyone understood the transformative power of gratitude, it was him. The next morning, Vin woke up with a heavy heart but also a spark of determination. He couldn't stop thinking about Mrs. Carter and the countless other teachers like her, people who had devoted their lives to shaping young minds only to be left struggling in their later years. The more he reflected on it, the angrier he became. How could society let this happen? Teachers were the unsung heroes of every community, yet when they retired, many were forgotten, left to navigate rising living costs and dwindling pensions, alone. Sitting at the small desk in his hotel room, Vin opened his notebook again. He stared at the scribbled ideas he'd jotted down the night before. Some of them felt raw and unpolished, while others sparked excitement. But one thing was clear. Whatever he did, it had to go beyond just helping Mrs. Carter. This was bigger than one person. It was about creating lasting change for an entire group of people who deserved better. As he flipped through the pages, guilt crept into his thoughts. Why hadn't he reached out to Mrs. Carter sooner? She had been such a pivotal figure in his life, yet once he left school, he never looked back. Sure, he thought about her occasionally, especially during interviews, when asked about his childhood influences, but those moments were fleeting, overshadowed by the demands of his career. Now, decades later, he realized how much time had slipped away, and how much she might have needed him earlier. "I should have done something," he muttered to himself, running a hand over his face. "I owed her that much." But self-blame wouldn't solve anything. What mattered now was action. Vin knew he had resources most people didn't: a massive platform, connections across industries, and the ability to rally support for causes close to his heart. If anyone could make a difference, it was him. Still, the weight of responsibility pressed down on him. Where should he start, and how could he ensure the message resonated without coming off as self-serving? He decided to call a few trusted friends and colleagues to bounce ideas around. First, he reached out to Michelle Rodriguez, his longtime co-star and friend, who had always shared his passion for giving back. When she answered, Vin explained everything: the grocery store encounter, what he'd learned about Mrs. Carter's situation, and his desire to do something meaningful. Michelle listened intently before responding with her trademark fiery enthusiasm. "Vin, this is huge," she said. "You're not just helping one teacher. You're shining a light on a problem no one talks about. People will listen because it's you, but more importantly, they'll care because it's real." Her words gave him courage. Next, he called his publicist, Sarah, who had managed his image for years. At first, Sarah was cautious, reminding him of the potential backlash if the initiative seemed insincere or overly promotional. But Vin cut her off mid-sentence. "This isn't about publicity," he said firmly. "It's about doing the right thing. If we can help even one teacher, it'll be worth it." Sarah paused, then softened. "Okay, Vin. Let's make it happen." With their support bolstering his resolve, Vin began sketching out a plan. He envisioned a campaign called Teachers Who Changed Lives, a movement designed to honor educators, like Mrs. Carter, while addressing the systemic issues affecting retired teachers. The centerpiece would be a documentary series featuring heartfelt stories of teachers who had made sacrifices for their students, only to face financial hardship later in life. It would be raw, emotional, and impossible to ignore. But Vin wanted to take it further. Alongside the documentary, he proposed setting up a foundation to provide direct financial assistance to retired teachers in need. The funds would come from donations raised through the campaign, with contributions matched by celebrities and corporate sponsors. He imagined hosting benefit concerts, partnering with schools, and using social media to amplify the message globally. Every step of the way, Mrs. Carter's story would remain front and center, a reminder of why this work mattered. As the hours passed, Vin's vision grew clearer. He knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, skeptics, and obstacles to overcome. But deep down, he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. Helping Mrs. Carter wasn't just about repaying a debt. It was about honoring the values she had instilled in him all those years ago: compassion, gratitude, resilience. By the time night fell, Vin leaned back in his chair, exhausted but hopeful. For the first time in a long while, he felt truly aligned with his mission. Tomorrow he would share his idea with Mrs. Carter herself, and hopefully inspire her to join him in rewriting the narrative for teachers everywhere. The next day, Vin decided to visit Mrs. Carter again. This time he brought flowers, a simple bouquet of sunflowers and daisies, and knocked on the door of her small apartment. When she opened it, her face lit up with surprise. "Vin, what?" "A lovely surprise," she said, stepping aside to let him in. Her home was modest but tidy, filled with books, photographs, and handmade crafts that hinted at a life rich in love and creativity despite its hardships. After exchanging pleasantries, Vin took a deep breath and began explaining why he had come. "Mrs. Carter," he started, his voice steady but tinged with emotion, "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation yesterday, about everything you've done for me, and for so many others, and I want to do something to honor that." She looked at him quizzically, tilting her head slightly. "Honor what, dear? You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do," Vin replied firmly. "You believed in me when no one else did. You taught me how to read, how to believe in myself, and how to dream bigger than I ever thought possible. And now," his voice softened, "now I want to make sure the world knows just how much teachers like you mean to all of us." He went on to explain his plan: the Teachers Who Changed Lives campaign, the documentary series, the foundation aimed at supporting retired educators. He told her how, Her story would be at the heart of it all, inspiring people to take action and create change. As he spoke, he watched her expression shift from confusion to awe, then finally to quiet pride. "Oh, Vin," she said softly, tears welling up in her eyes. This is more than I could have ever imagined." She paused, dabbing at her cheeks with a tissue. "But are you sure you want to put me in the spotlight? I'm just an ordinary woman who loved teaching." "You're far from ordinary," Vin countered gently. "You changed lives, including mine. That's not something to downplay. The world needs to hear your story because it represents so many others like you. Teachers who gave their all and deserve better than what they're getting now." Mrs. Carter sat quietly for a moment, letting his words sink in. Then with a slow nod, she smiled. "If this can help even one teacher feel seen and supported, then yes, let's do it. But only if we keep the focus on the cause, not on me." Relieved and inspired by her humility, Vin agreed wholeheartedly. Together they spent the afternoon discussing details, sharing memories and laughing over old stories from his school days. By the end of the visit, Mrs. Carter seemed lighter, as though a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. For the first time in years, she felt hopeful, not just for herself, but for the countless educators who might benefit from this movement. Later that week, Vin appeared on a popular late-night talk show to share Mrs. Carter's story. Dressed casually in a leather jacket and jeans, he walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. After exchanging jokes with the host and promoting his latest film briefly, Vin turned serious. Leaning forward in his chair, he looked directly into the camera and began to speak. "I'm here tonight to talk about someone who has meant the world to me. My fifth-grade teacher, Mrs. Evelyn Carter," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She didn't just teach me how to read. She taught me how to believe in myself. And now, decades later, I found out she's living in poverty after dedicating her entire life to helping kids like me succeed." The audience fell silent, hanging on every word. Vin recounted their recent meeting, describing her resilience and generosity despite her circumstances. He explained the campaign he was launching and urged viewers to support retired teachers through donations, advocacy, and spreading awareness. By the time he finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye in the house, including the hosts. As soon as the episode aired, social media exploded. Viewers were moved to tears by Vin's sincerity and Mrs. Carter's story. Hashtags like #TOS Thank a Teacher and #TOS Teachers, who changed lives trended worldwide. Celebrities, politicians, and everyday people shared their own experiences of teachers who had impacted their lives, amplifying the message further. Donations poured in almost immediately, along with offers of partnerships from nonprofits, schools, and corporations eager to join the cause. For Vin, seeing the overwhelming response was both humbling and exhilarating. He knew this was just the beginning, but already he could see the seeds of change taking root. Mrs. Carter's legacy was about to inspire millions, proving once again that gratitude, when acted upon, has the power to transform lives, including his own. The momentum following Vin Diesel's late-night appearance was nothing short of extraordinary. Within hours, the internet buzzed with conversations about Mrs. Evelyn Carter and the struggles faced by retired teachers across the country. Social media feeds were flooded with heartfelt posts as people shared stories of their favorite educators, the ones who stayed late to help them study, believed in them when they doubted themselves, or inspired dreams that shaped their futures. The hashtag #ImmaShareTeachers who changed lives trended globally for days, sparking a movement far larger than anyone had anticipated. Major news outlets picked up the story, running segments on primetime television and front-page articles in newspapers. Journalists reached out to Vin, eager to learn more about his campaign and how others could get involved. He used these opportunities to shine a light not only on Mrs. Carter, but also on the systemic issues affecting educators everywhere. "This isn't just about one teacher," he emphasized during an interview. "It's about recognizing the value of every single person who has dedicated their life to shaping young minds." Celebrities joined the cause almost immediately. Michelle Rodriguez posted a video urging her fans to donate, while Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson pledged a significant contribution to the foundation. Even actors outside Vin's usual circle stepped forward. Leonardo DiCaprio announced a partnership between his environmental foundation and the Teachers Who Changed Lives initiative, highlighting the importance of investing in education to build a better future. Musicians like Beyoncé and Taylor Swift donated anonymously, and athletes such as LeBron James tweeted messages of support, promising to host fundraisers in their communities. But it wasn't just A-listers making waves. Ordinary people from all walks of life rallied behind the campaign. Teachers' unions organized events to raise awareness, parents volunteered at local schools to show appreciation, and students wrote letters thanking their current and former educators. In small towns and big cities alike, bake sales, charity, runs, and benefit concerts sprang up, each one adding to the growing fund. By the end of the first month, the campaign had raised over $50 million, a staggering sum that exceeded even Vin's wildest expectations. Amidst the whirlwind, Mrs. Carter found herself thrust into the spotlight. Though initially hesitant, she embraced her role as the face of the movement with grace and humility. With Vin by her side, she traveled to various cities to speak at rallies, conferences, and educational summits. Her speeches were simple yet profoundly moving, often bringing audiences to tears. "I didn't do anything special," she would say, her voice steady despite the emotion in the room. "I simply loved my job and cared for my students. If this campaign can ensure other teachers are taken care of when they retire, then I'm happy to be part of it." One particularly memorable moment came during a live broadcast of a national morning show. As Vin introduced Mrs. Carter to the audience, the camera zoomed in on her face, capturing the warmth and wisdom etched into every line. When she spoke, her words resonated deeply. Teaching is not just a profession, it's a calling, and those of us who answer that call deserve to live our golden years with dignity and peace. The studio erupted in applause, and viewers watching from home called in to express their gratitude, sharing stories of teachers who had changed their lives. The campaign also sparked discussions at higher levels of government. Lawmakers began drafting legislation aimed at improving pensions and benefits for retired educators, citing the overwhelming public response as evidence of the need for change. School districts revisited their budgets, finding ways to allocate more resources towards supporting veteran teachers nearing retirement age. For the first time in decades, the issue of educator welfare took center stage in policy debates. Through it all, Vin remained deeply involved, attending meetings, giving interviews, and personally overseeing the distribution of funds. He made sure the money went directly to those in need, bypassing bureaucratic red tape whenever possible. Each success story touched him profoundly, from hearing about a retired teacher finally able to afford necessary medical treatments to learning that another could pay off crippling debt accumulated during years of service. As weeks turned into months, the ripple effects of the campaign became undeniable. Retired teachers across the country reported feeling seen and valued for the first time in years. Younger educators gained renewed hope, knowing that efforts were underway to secure a brighter future for their profession. And Vin, through it
all, rediscovered a sense of purpose that transcended Hollywood stardom. His bond with Mrs. Carter grew stronger, reminding him daily of the power of gratitude and the impact one person can have when they choose to act with love and intention.
As the months rolled by, the Teachers Who Changed Lives campaign continued to grow and evolve, touching lives in ways no one could have predicted. The foundation Vin Diesel started became a beacon of hope for retired educators across the country and, eventually, around the world. What began as a personal mission to honor Mrs. Evelyn Carter had transformed into a global movement that brought attention to the quiet struggles of teachers everywhere. For Mrs. Carter, life changed dramatically, but not in the flashy, overwhelming way one might expect. Despite her newfound fame, she remained grounded, always prioritizing gratitude over glamour. With financial stability now secured thanks to anonymous donations from Vin and others, she was able to move into a safer, more comfortable apartment, close to the community center where she volunteered. Her health improved after receiving long-delayed medical treatments, and she even adopted a small dog named Charlie, who quickly became her constant companion. But what truly brought her joy was seeing the impact of the campaign firsthand. Every week she received letters and emails from teachers sharing how the initiative had helped them pay off debts, cover medical bills, or simply enjoy retirement without constant worry. Some wrote about being able to visit grandchildren they hadn't seen in years. Others described finally taking vacations they'd dreamed of but never thought possible. Each story filled Mrs. Carter with pride. Not because she was at the center of it all, but because she knew these changes were making a real difference. Meanwhile, Vin threw himself fully into the cause, balancing his acting career with his role as an advocate for educators. He traveled extensively, speaking at schools, universities, and policy forums, urging leaders to prioritize better pensions and benefits for teachers. His speeches often included anecdotes about Mrs. Carter, painting vivid pictures of her kindness and dedication. "She didn't just teach me reading comprehension," he would say with a smile. "She taught me compassion, resilience, and the importance of believing in people, even when they don't believe in themselves." The documentary series inspired by Mrs. Carter's story premiered to critical acclaim. Filmed over several months, it featured interviews with retired teachers, current educators, students, and policymakers, weaving together emotional narratives with hard-hitting facts about the challenges facing the education system. One episode focused on Mrs. Carter herself, capturing her journey from a young, passionate teacher to a symbol of change. Viewers couldn't help but feel moved by her humility and strength, and many credited the series with opening their eyes to the realities of educator welfare. In addition to raising funds, the campaign spurred tangible policy changes. Several states passed laws increasing pension payouts for retired teachers, while federal grants were allocated to support struggling school districts. Even private companies joined the effort, offering discounted housing options and health care plans specifically designed for retired educators. It was clear that the movement was creating ripples far beyond its initial scope. For Vin, the experience was transformative. While he had always been proud of his work in Hollywood, this campaign gave him a deeper sense of fulfillment. He realized that storytelling wasn't just about entertaining audiences. It was also about inspiring action and fostering empathy. Working alongside Mrs. Carter reminded him of why he fell in love with acting in the first place: the power to connect with people and make a difference. Their bond deepened through shared experiences. Whether it was attending events together, brainstorming ideas for the foundation, or simply sitting down for coffee and reminiscing about old times, Vin and Mrs. Carter formed a partnership rooted in mutual respect and admiration. She often joked that he was still her star student, while he teased her about finally getting the recognition she deserved. By the end of the year, the campaign had raised nearly $200 million funding scholarships, housing projects, and wellness programs. For educators, thousands of lives had been positively impacted, and conversations about supporting teachers had shifted from the margins to the mainstream. For Mrs. Carter, the greatest reward wasn't the accolades or media attention. It was knowing that her legacy would live on through the countless lives she and Vin had touched. As snow began to fall during the holiday season, Vin visited Mrs. Carter's new apartment, bringing along a potted plant as a gift. Sitting together by the window, they watched the city lights twinkle in the distance. "You know," Vin said softly, breaking the comfortable silence, "this whole thing started because of you. Because of what you did for me all those years ago." Mrs. Carter smiled, her eyes twinkling. "And look what you've done with it, Vin. You've given so many people hope. That's your gift, not mine." He shook his head, grinning. "No, Mrs. Carter, it's ours." Years passed, and the impact of the Teachers Who Changed Lives campaign continued to ripple outward, growing stronger with each passing day. What had started as a heartfelt gesture by Vin Diesel to honor his fifth-grade teacher, Mrs. Evelyn Carter, had blossomed into a global movement that reshaped how society viewed and valued educators. Schools, communities, and governments embraced the cause, ensuring that retired teachers no longer faced neglect or hardship in their golden years. One of the most visible outcomes of the campaign was the establishment of scholarships named after Mrs. Carter. These scholarships provided financial aid to students pursuing careers in education, ensuring that future generations of teachers could enter the profession without the burden of crippling student debt. Each year, During an awards ceremony held at a prestigious university, recipients were invited to share their aspirations. Many spoke passionately about following in Mrs. Carter's footsteps, dedicated individuals who wanted nothing more than to inspire young minds and make a difference. In addition to scholarships, several schools across the country were renamed in her honor. One elementary school in New York City, located just blocks from where Vin first reconnected with Mrs. Carter, proudly became the Evelyn Carter Academy for Excellence. On the day of its dedication, hundreds of people gathered to celebrate. Not only Mrs. Carter, but also the countless teachers like her whose tireless work often went unnoticed. Standing on stage alongside Vin, she addressed the crowd with tears in her eyes. "I never sought recognition," she said softly, her voice steady despite the emotion. "But if my story can remind even one person of the importance of teachers, then it has been worth it." The foundation itself evolved into a permanent organization, expanding its reach beyond financial assistance to include mentorship programs, mental health support, and advocacy initiatives. Retired educators found solace in connecting with one another through online forums and local meetups, forming bonds that reminded them they weren't alone. Younger teachers benefited too, gaining access to resources and advice from seasoned professionals who understood the challenges of the job. For Vin, the campaign solidified his role not just as a Hollywood icon, but as a catalyst for meaningful change. He remained actively involved in the foundation's efforts, using his platform to spotlight emerging issues within education. Whether lobbying lawmakers, hosting benefit events, or mentoring aspiring actors and filmmakers, he carried forward the lessons Mrs. Carter had instilled in him: compassion, perseverance, and the belief that everyone deserves a chance to thrive. Though fame still surrounded him, Vin often reflected on how this chapter of his life had brought him closer to his roots. Reconnecting with Mrs. Carter wasn't just about repaying a debt. It was about rediscovering the values that made him who he was. Her quiet strength and unwavering kindness served as a constant reminder of what truly mattered. They remained close friends, meeting regularly to discuss the foundation's progress and laugh over old memories. Mrs. Carter, now in her late 70s, spent her days enjoying the simple pleasures she had once sacrificed for others. She took long walks with Charlie, read voraciously, and occasionally visited classrooms to share stories with wide-eyed students. Though she preferred staying out of the limelight, she cherished the knowledge that her legacy would endure, a testament to the power of gratitude and giving back. As time went on, the world began to see teachers not as background figures, but as pillars of society. The systemic changes sparked by the campaign ensured that educators received fair compensation, robust pensions, and access to essential resources throughout their careers. Parents grew more vocal in supporting teachers, while students learned early on to appreciate the hard work behind every lesson plan. Looking back, Vin often thought about the grocery store encounter that set everything in motion. It was a moment of serendipity, a chance meeting that transformed both his life and Mrs. Carter's. But more importantly, it reminded him that every action, no matter how small, has the potential to create waves of change. Mrs. Carter's influence had shaped him as a child. Now together, they had shaped the world. On a quiet evening years later, sitting side by side on Mrs. Carter's porch as the sun dipped below the horizon, Vin turned to her with a smile. "You know," he said, "if I hadn't walked, I